Chair now recognizes Ms. Titus for 5 minutes.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you go towards the end, there are not many questions left to ask, but you have the luxury of having heard everything gone before and kind of reached some conclusions. One thing I heard was my colleague on the other side called the secretary, most of the scientists in the world, and the heads of 195 countries who belong to the UN climate agreement grifters. Now, that's something that should be taken down, but since he's gone in his typical hit-and-run fashion, it wouldn't be much point. Now, the arguments that I've heard from both sides, on the other side of the aisle we hear, you can't make China do anything. You can't force China to do anything. You can't impose any restrictions on China. Therefore, we shouldn't be doing anything in the United States. On the other hand, when you're getting ready to go to China and try to negotiate something or make some points or try to influence their decision, they don't want you to go. They think that's not a good idea. Also, we hear that you have a pro-China, not a pro-American approach, and you are not helping U.S. business and workers. On the other hand, these people who are saying this voted against the Inflation Reduction Act, which made a big investment in manufacturing and workers and solar energy panels that we don't have to get from the Uyghurs, but can be made here. Speaking of the Uyghurs, there's a real now sudden interest in human rights of the Uyghurs, but it doesn't bother them too much to deal with Saudi Arabia when it comes to these issues. Also, we know that this is a world issue. Climate change affects everything from demographics to politics to economics, and yet we're not looking at the rest of the world. It's as though only the U.S. and China exist on the globe. So I would ask you, Mr. Secretary, because climate change and energy policy is so pervasive in everything we do, it's not just about dealing with the next storm or the next wildfire. It has so much of an impact on peacekeeping, on development of foreign countries, on our role internationally. Are what you're hearing from the other side diminishing our influence, hurting our role as we try to kind of move back into being an international leader, kind of upsetting some of our NATO relations because of what Europe is doing and what we're not? Are the cuts in the budget going to make a difference because we can't now invest what the president would like to see us do to help the rest of the world with these global problems? Would you just address that sort of thing for us?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you very much. Let me just say I've got the figures delivered to me here. If I take 15 seconds on this. China, according to the International Energy Agency, by 2030, China will have somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 gigawatts of renewable energy. That's by fathoms larger than any other country in the planet. And so they're moving very aggressively in that regard. With respect to look, people really do count on America for a lot of things in the world. And I think everyone should be extraordinarily proud of our history of doing things. We're the largest humanitarian donor in the world. And you look at what we've done with AIDS in Africa or Ebola or, through various counterterrorism efforts, other things. But we also, for a long period of time, projected, and this is sort of the soft power projection, but we also, we helped people develop. We helped people do more. That's been retreating in the last years. We're now giving less than a lot of other countries are doing in order to help, particularly on climate. And I think it does have an impact. I think that people ask questions. I certainly hear these questions. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you more present? Why aren't you? Look at who's giving us help here, and so forth. So I think that, you can't just sit there anywhere and wish that things are going to be as they have been historically. You have to invest in it. You have to actually proactively have people on the ground. You have to build relationships. You have to do things that people see you doing, not just on an economic competitive basis, but because it's the right thing to do. And I think we've fallen a little behind on that. I know President Biden feels very strongly about living up to our commitments and our values.
Thank you very much. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. Chair now recognizes